All righty, welcome to episode 7 of Personality Crisis. I'm John Cole, your co-host, along with New York Times Pitchpot and Mr. Mix. And today our guest is Gary Trauner. Just to set the ground rules, one of the, do I call it an impediment? One of the foundations of this podcast is that I am not allowed to do any research about our guests. I do know Gary from, I don't want to say run-ins, that makes it sound like you're law enforcement and I'm in trouble, but encounters over the years. And my website years ago was a support of his in a run in Wyoming. So what we're going to talk about today are briefly his experiences as a candidate, as a Democrat in a deeply red state, and hopefully share of our similar frustrations with me living in West Virginia, another deeply red state, and his living in Wyoming. So welcome to the podcast, Gary.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it. Where'd the name come?
So what do you want to open with? What do you want to talk about? Let's talk about your first run and why people should know who you are.
It's a good question why people should know who I am. So I decided, never been in politics before. I had been elected to chair of the school board in my Teton County, Wyoming, where I live. And I don't know, man, I just got fed up with we had a 5-term incumbent named Barbara Cubin, who was a complete loser. Didn't do anything for the state, didn't do anything for our country, for anybody other than herself, as usual. And I just felt like I could do a better job. So I just found the head of the local Democratic Party and asked if anybody was running for Congress or if anyone had any interest. And of course, that was not the case because it's deep red Wyoming and it's hard to find candidates. So I decided to go for it. And for anyone who followed my race in 2006, when the first polls came out, my name recognition in the state was about 3%. And I managed to find a great.
And those were relatives.
Yeah, well, they were relatives and a couple of kids that babysitted, a couple of people that babysitted for my kids, maybe. But I found a great campaign manager who'd been involved in Wyoming politics. She was amazing. But her theory was you're going to go door to door. You're going to go knock on every door in Wyoming that you can. And I had never run any kind of race like this before. So I was like, sure, why not? And that's what I did. And by the end of the race, I think it was actually in 2006, the closest race in the country. I needed to change 500 more voters to win. I lost by 0.4%. Not so sure I lost. There were voting issues. That's irrelevant at this point. And I was off and running. I was kind of like, got the bug. I realized this was what I really wanted to do, was try and make a difference at the federal level. So a couple more races came after that, which we can talk about as well.
Now, this is absolutely unimportant, but I'm not going to be able to go on until I know the answer to this. What was your daily drive while knocking on every doors in Wyoming?
Well, it wasn't necessarily. It's a great question. It wasn't a daily drive. It's a statewide race, right? There's only one House member, so it's like a Senate race, and I would go out and spend about a week at a time in the state, driving around the state, and usually between towns. There's an old saying in Wyoming that Wyoming's a really small town with really long streets. So I would probably drive 3-4 hours minimum between towns to go campaign. And sometimes I would hit 2 or 3 towns in a day. But I would go out for, a week and then come home for 2 or 3 days and replenish and then go back out on the road again. A lot of road time by myself.
Okay, that led in a direction I didn't think. I meant, what were you driving?
What actually was I driving?
Yeah. Did you have like a campaign pickup truck or?
No, my first race, damn, I'm trying to think of what it was. I think it was a Honda CRV, believe it or not, which I got grief on from some of the union folks because it wasn't made in the US. And it had, metallic stickers on the side that said Trauner for Congress. Yeah, just my normal car.
So what was your interaction with the national Dems like, or the the national infrastructure. And again, this is 20 years ago, so maybe it's changed and gotten better, but
Yeah, I don't
I'm
think it
not
has
over it.
that much though. So, it was hard for me to get any buy-in from anybody at the national level initially because Wyoming, right? It had been 40 years since there'd been a Democratic representative in Wyoming. But I had a really good, I had someone that I knew from New York. I'm from New York originally, from just outside of New York City. And I lived in Wyoming for 20 years at the time. I've been there for 35 years now. But, um, and they got me a meeting with Rahm Emanuel, who was the head of the D Trip. And am I allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah.
Because I want to quote Ram on this one. Um, so, I'm waiting to meet him and I'm in his office. Of course, he's keeping me waiting. I've never met him before. And he walks on in and he just looks at me and he says, he doesn't even say hello. He just says, you know what people say when I'm telling them I'm meeting a guy from Wyoming? I'm like, no, sir, I don't. He says, they asked me what kind of fucking crack cocaine I'm smoking right now. And that was the start of the meeting. And basically, he was Rom. He just cursed a lot and told me what he wanted me to do. But at the end of the meeting, he said, look, if you have raised X million dollars, if you're competitive in the polls, and you got a media plan that we like, maybe by September, October, we'll think about talking to you. And that was kind of it at first. Um, and I did all of that. So by the end, he came in 3 weeks. I was tied in the polls. He came in 3 weeks from the end of the race and started telling me I needed to run all these hardcore negative ads, which I had been running actually a very positive campaign. That was the whole difference maker, I thought. And I kind of got pissed at him. I was like, man, where were you, 4 months ago when I needed you to help me with some money, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're telling me to change every tactic I've used to try and win. I'm not going to do it. Nonetheless, they made me red to blue for my next race in '08 for first wave red to blue. But Chris Van Hollen came in on the D Trip and he was a little bit easier to deal with.
What are your thoughts on Chris Van Hollen?
I like him. I think he's great. I think he's in a safe seat. That never hurts. But I do think he's willing to step up and has shown that he's willing to step up. There haven't been that many folks in the last year since Trump got in the second time that have really stepped up to the plate on the Senate side. Murphy is, I think White House is, Elizabeth Warren kind of always has been to some extent, but I think Chris, he's a good man too, and I think he's willing to fight the fight.
Let's not forget Tammy Baldwin and Hirono.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there are some, not enough. Not Schumer, that's for sure. Although he's doing well recently, just the other day on the healthcare thing on the shutdown.
Yeah, did you see the Mamdani Conid ad that he made with him walking around the
No, I
streets
missed
of New
that.
York? You'll have to check that out.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's straight from the Mamdani playbook, and everyone was bashing him for it, and I was like, no, I'll take it any way I can get it. This
exactly,
is the most human Schumer's looked in 40 years.
exactly. I hate to say this, and I'm glad that he's doing it, but he's just out of time and place. He should, he's not the person for the moment, or at least hasn't been yet.
God, it's so tragic. Wyoming. How is I feel West Virginia has gotten crazier under Trumpism, and I'm wondering if that's the same everywhere, or is there
Absolutely.
starting to become a little bit of a backlash? Or
No, as a matter of fact, first of all, we are the reddest state in the country. I know West Virginia might give us a fight for it, but I think,
we're number two.
yeah, in terms of presidential vote, et cetera, and in terms of registration differential between D's and R's, we're the reddest state in the country. Um, and we're the only state right now, the first state whose state ledge is completely controlled by the Freedom Caucus, who just got control last election cycle. So our state legislature is run by a bunch of wackos, basically. And no, so Wyoming, unfortunately, hasn't hasn't been a backlash against Trump. And the whole thing about Wyoming is it used to be more of a hands-off libertarian, don't tell me how to live my life Republicanism, right? I mean, they did a vote on abortion, a constitutional amendment vote. It's probably been 15 years now, maybe more, but and the people that put it up wanted to get rid of abortion, and it went down in flames, like in a huge way. People were like, just don't tell me how to live my life. But that's changed big time. And sadly, we got a ways to go. We're also, by the way, we're the biggest coal state in the country. People don't realize that. We're bigger than West Virginia or Pennsylvania. 40% of all the coal in the country comes out of Wyoming.
What about agriculture? What's the agricultural situation in Wyoming? Are your farmers getting hosed like everywhere else?
Yeah, although beef prices are as high as they've ever been. So, we run a lot of cattle out here. So I think those guys are probably pretty happy at this point in time. But, Wyoming's always viewed itself as an ag state, and ag is 2% of the economy, 2% of the GDP of the state, and probably less than 2% of the jobs base. So, but that's kind of our mythos, right? The Wyoming cowboy, kind of open spaces, cattle, you name it. So they're
What are
not.
the economic drivers? Tourism, education, healthcare.
Yeah, tourism's big. Um, you know, Government. I mean, when I say government, that means teachers, local government, et cetera. That's the biggest employer in the state. Tourism's probably the second biggest employer in the state, but they don't. Neither of those pay as well as coal jobs or, um, you know, some of the other things that they're trying to do here in Wyoming, energy wise. I mean, I view that we're an energy state, but we're not. We shouldn't just be a coal state or an oil state. But coal pays our bills. John, always
Mm.
follow the money, right? And
Yeah,
we have no state income tax, no corporate state income tax. So we get most of our money from severance taxes from minerals. When companies sever minerals from the ground, they pay royalties.
right.
And coal has been king. And it funds our roads, it funds our education system, and our state ledge is they won't no, they won't go against that.
Yeah, here we even have like license plates that say "Friends of Coal."
Yeah.
It's a Friends of Coal vanity license plate, and people, you'll have people with their pick 'em up trucks with the miner on the ground with the headlight all the way across the back of the back windshield on the pickup truck. So it's always been crazy to me because they're like, well, my granddaddy mined coal and my son mined coal or my dad mined coal, and I'm like, yeah, they did all that so you didn't have to.
Yeah.
That's we're
And the thing that amazes, first of all, we're big open strip mines versus, open air strip mines versus West Virginia, right? Which is much more deep in the ground stuff. So it's kind of a different kind of coal mining. But I try to tell people up in the coal mining corner of the state, which is the northeast corner of the state, like, look, these companies don't care about you, right? Like, this is the thing about capitalism. Capitalism at a macro level has been, I guess, the best job creating system so far devised by human beings in theory. But at the micro level, at the company level, jobs are a bug in the system, not a feature. The last thing they want to do is hire people. The first thing they do when they companies get in trouble is lay people off. And if they can do it more efficiently without people, with technology, that they will. And that's what the coal companies are doing. Um, and it doesn't really benefit a lot of people in our state anymore. All the money goes out of state to the big corporate headquarters of Arch Coal and Peabody Energy.
that's how it is here. In fact, not only do we worship coal, but we incentivize it. We're paying far more for energy prices because we insist on using coal plants instead of the motherload of natural gas that we're sitting on top of. We could without a blink fuel every state in the country with
Right.
just the natural gas we have here, which would, you still don't want to pursue that as a strategy because you want to eventually get away from natural gas, but it would be so much better than coal,
Totally.
and just can't do it. In fact, they give away all these tax breaks for gas companies to come in, explore, establish the wells, hire people here allegedly, which they don't. They always bring them in from Oklahoma,
Exactly.
Texas,
Man, Jim's.
whatnot, and do all that. And then at the same time, with the other hand, incentivize the direct competition, coal. So it
Right.
makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
What about on the local level? Is there anything rumbling on the ground with the people? Because even just reading the comments to local newspapers around here, I see that a lot of anxiety, but it's still everybody just fighting each other in this traditional left-right frame. Oh,
Yeah.
well, the Democrats want to do this. Oh, the Republicans want to do this. I was like, it's the billionaires and the millionaires doing this to all of us, you morons. But
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's, locally, I think there's starting to be some pushback. I think most people, even in our state, they're struggling, right? I mean, they're struggling to get by. And so, you know, they want to blame somebody. I mean, this is the whole thing that Trump has been successful on, right? It's just blame others, find an enemy, blame the other. And my view, having gone door to door and knocked on so many freaking doors in Wyoming, is people, Democrats are always like, why are people voting against their best interests? But people don't think they're voting against their best interests, right? They're voting for what they perceive as their best interest. And, from my perspective, even if you're hurting economically and you've got uncertainty about your job or your future or things, groceries are getting more expensive, you know, people who are unhappy in their lives, they want to have someone else take responsibility for it. So someone comes along and says, you know what? There's little brown people scurrying over the border. And even though you've never met any of them, they're ruining your life. And, you have someone to blame. And it's easy to do that. So there are some rumblings, I think. I think we need to try and find a way to get away from that sort of blame the other and put it back on things that are really are direct impacts like healthcare, the cost of groceries, et cetera. I think the Dems actually are pretty smart on the healthcare front with this shutdown fight.
I think it's breaking through.
Yeah, I think it is finally. Um, the other thing
And
is all of us.
of all the people we have to help thank for helping us, one is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't know if you've seen her screaming about
Well, I read
the
the
health.
other day that like 78,000 people in her district are on Obamacare, and 74,000 of them are getting subsidies. So she knows that if this thing, goes the way it's going, and insurance premiums rise by 75 or 100% on the exchange, she's screwed. Well, she might not be screwed, but it's going to be a problem.
Right.
Yeah, even she can see it.
Let's head back to where we started this. I want you to talk a bit about the impediments to new people running. You both talked about the DCCC under Rahm and then Chris Van Hollen. What do you see from the DCCC today? Are they still kind of worthless, or we don't want to slag them because I don't have any personal experience with them, but
yeah, worthless might be a strong word, but barely. First of all, people, I don't know if normal run of the mill Dems understand this, but the D-Trip and the DSCC on the Senate side, they are primarily, first and foremost, incumbent protection organizations. They exist to protect the incumbents that are already elected in office. So, as a challenger, it can be hard to break through in the first place. The second thing is these guys, look, they're elected, they're in DC, and they spend so much time inside the DC bubble that I think they really don't understand sometimes what's going on out especially in red states, deep red states, where as a candidate, you may have to um, not give up on your principles, but you may have to frame things differently, right? We introduced, when I first ran for office, wolves were a big issue. Reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. And ranchers hate wolves because they prey on their cattle and stuff and sheep and whatever. So if I told people I loved wolves and I'm an environmental activist or whatever, I'm dead in the water, right? But if I make it a states' rights issue, if I tell people we don't want wolves running down the streets of Casper and Riverton, Wyoming, but if we don't manage wolves well as a state, the feds are going to come in and tell us how to manage wolves. That's, then all of a sudden I've got something to run on, right? So I'm still supporting the reintroduction, but I'm doing it in a way that says, you know what? Wyoming hates the feds, and if we don't do it right, the feds are going to come tell us what to do, right? So there's ways to frame things. I don't think the D-Trip or even the DSCC kind of understand that kind of stuff. The other thing is when they made me red to blue in my second run in '08, they wanted me to hire their consultants. That was a prereq. I had to hire their DC consultants. So their media person, direct mail, pollster. And I ended up firing two of them pretty quickly because they didn't really give a shit about Wyoming. They wanted to just have my name. Wyoming was a hot race because I had almost won it the last time. And they wanted to check that box and then just do whatever the heck they wanted to do. So I think sometimes they don't listen to what's going on in local districts. Um, yeah. And they want to control everything.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that every election has been so hyper nationalized and around social issues that they don't understand that there are like real nuts and bolt issues in certain precincts in certain areas that matter an awful lot and
Right.
are worth talking about and are important to the voters there, that you can't just come in with outside consultants and run the same sort of campaign that you might run nationally for someone in a safe district.
Yeah.
And they just
Exactly.
don't get that at all.
Right.
Uh, what was it I heard the other day? So there's some big hubbub about Democrats need to be more open to
Pro-life.
pro-life.
Yeah, I saw
It's
that
like,
too.
well, we are. You can be as pro-life as you want as a Democrat. It's just you just don't get to tell everybody else what they get to do.
Exactly. That's exactly
So,
right.
and I don't think they understand that. I have no problem with people being pro-life, just as long as you're not voting to restrict the choices and liberties of others. And I don't think the DCCC or national people understand that.
I think a lot of voters don't. I mean, you live in rural West Virginia, right? And you've got all your buddies that, in Bethany and everything, wherever else. And like, I remember going down so I ran for U.S. Senate in 2018. I got my ass kicked by Barrasso because by then everything had gotten so polarized. So I ran in '06 and '08.
Isn't Barrasso coal too?
Yeah, he's a doctor, but he's cold. He's just a psychophant. He stood over Mitch McConnell's shoulder every second of every day and never said a word, just, quietly worked his way up the system. But I was down in Boulder, Colorado, visiting family and having dinner with a bunch of, super liberal people. And they were just railing on Trump and they were railing on red state people. And I was like, look, man, I've knocked on so many doors. I disagree on 98% of stuff with those people, but most of them aren't bad people. And they may not be educated, but they're not stupid. And they know the way that you're talking about them right now. And really, at this point, they don't really give a shit about policy. They just want someone to stick a hot poker in your eyes and burn your eyes out because the way you talk about them. And people in DC and elsewhere don't really get that.
I get it, but I'm the biggest hypocrite about it. I mean, there's nothing. You've been told over and over and over again this is going to happen, soybean farmers. You voted for racism. You're getting racism and poverty.
Right.
Congratulations. So I mean, I understand the conundrum there because it's like, what? You don't want to immediately label and turn everybody off, but at the same time, your actions have consequences. And we told you this was going to happen. How did we know this was going to happen? Because it happened in the first term.
Right.
And then there were at least enough Democrats in Congress to bail you out. Now there aren't. So enjoy.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, it's, you know, I talk to obviously people that are on the other side of the spectrum, and of course they're going off about immigration and they're going off about trans people. And I asked them, like, you ever met a trans person? And most people, they probably haven't, don't even know it. But most of those people will say, no, I haven't. I'm like, okay, so, so grocery prices are going through the roof and you're pissed off about trans people using a bathroom and you've never had to deal with that. Right. And I ask them about immigration, same thing. I'm like, do you know anybody that's lost their job to an immigrant? And they don't. Right. But somehow, I'm like, so your healthcare costs are going through the roof and billionaires are taking all your money and you're pissed off because of people you've never met and never seen. It's incredible.
I've said it before. The craziest thing about living in Arizona for 6 months of the year, it was Tempe, right outside Phoenix,
Yep.
is going back and having to convince people that A, it's not a crime-infested hellhole and the streets aren't on fire, and that B, there is immigration's just not an issue. It's not on the news every night. Like I remember watching the nightly news in Arizona the entire time, and immigration rarely, if ever, came up. And then driving home, I stopped in Columbus, Ohio. I was 3 hours home. I couldn't drive anymore, and I thought I'm only 3 hours away, but at the same time, I'm not going out taking out a minivan of 6 people in a family, because I fell asleep. So I'm just going to stop. Turned on the nightly news in the middle of Ohio, and the local news stations ran with immigration stories for 10 minutes. I was like, you people are 2,000 miles away from the border. I was 300 miles away, and nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how that has shaped so many people's lives when it has no impact on them whatsoever.
It's amazing. And the other thing is, like, what do they think the immigrants are doing here, man? They're working, right? I mean, what are the numbers? The estimates 93 or 94% of undocumented males are working, right? They're getting hired. Like, you want to get rid of illegal immigrants? Arrest the CEO of the company that's knowingly hiring them. You'll change behavior in about 10 seconds. Not that we should, just saying.
Are there any immigrant communities in Wyoming?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, where I live, Teton County, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, very heavy tourism. National parks are nearby. All of the menial jobs are immigrants. I mean, our school district probably in elementary schools now 30% plus Latino, Hispanic.
What about the healthcare system?
I was actually the CEO. I ran the hospital, our hospital here in Jackson. A fair amount of people come in and we have a lot of write-offs and a lot of charity care. We're a sole community provider hospital. We're not part of a chain. We're a community hospital. But we do fine.
No, I mean immigrant present, because in West Virginia, at least, if I go to sign up for a medicine, when I look at the doctor list of potential doctors in that field through my portal,
right,
it looks like a UN who's who.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think rural America realizes what's going to happen if this anti-immigration push and this H-1B visa thing and all that goes through. I was wondering, is there a large?
It's not where I live, because it's honestly, unfortunately it's gotten expensive to live here. So most of the folks here are docs that can come from elsewhere for the lifestyle, but the rest of Wyoming, yes. And interesting, John, not to get into it, but I had to go down to MD Anderson for cancer surgery last year. I'm fine. And down there in Houston, I would say 80% of the staff that took care of me was probably on H-1B visas. And they're going to get hurt big time.
So what do you want to talk about that we haven't already discussed?
I want to talk about inequality, man. I think
All right.
It's killing us. It's, climate change is the existential issue of our time for the world, but inequality causes abrupt societal change, and especially inequality when people don't think there's opportunity. And I always ask people a simple question. I'm going to ask you, and it's not a gotcha, but I am going to ask you not to do a lot of math in your head. Just try and give me a quick answer. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos are both worth about $400 billion. If you make $1 million a year and you get to keep it all, how many years would you have to work to have $400 billion? Quick guess.
4,000, 5,000.
400,000 years. Okay? Nobody should have that much money. I don't care how they made it. I don't care where it came from. Nobody in our society should have that much money because you always have to follow the money. Money leads to power and control, right? So inequality is killing us. And the corollary to that is one of my favorite quotes is Thomas Jefferson: the best defense of democracy is an informed electorate. We have an ignorant electorate when it comes to policies in this country. And I know because I knocked on 20, 30, 40, 50,000 doors over 3 campaigns, right? People have no clue. So they don't know that there's a thing called stepped up basis where rich people that own a lot of stock get to pass it on to their kids and nobody pays a tax on those gains when they pass it on. But you and I, if we own a couple of shares of a company, when we sell it, we pay tax. Nobody knows that hedge fund billionaires have something called the carried interest rule, where they pay capital gains on their income, while you and I, hardworking laborers or whatever, pay ordinary income rates that are much higher. I mean, the whole system is like geared towards transferring money upwards, and it's killing us.
I think that's as good a place as any to stop. So depressing on this lovely morning.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we could do is, it sounds so counterintuitive, we really need to raise the level of pay for House and Senate members and up their housing allowances. Because right now, the only people who can afford to run are wealthy people.
That's exactly right.
I mean, you can count the AOCs and Maxwell Frosts on one hand. Everybody else already is coming in. And again, it makes it sound like we're attacking rich people. I'm not attacking rich people for being rich. Great, you did all that. But they come, when you get into those upper stratospheres of wealth, everything changes and your perspective changes, your assumptions changes, your understanding of what people need to survive and exist and what motivates them changes. And you don't have the right perspective to be writing legislation that's for the entire country. You're only capable of thinking of one level of the population that's so much better off than everybody else. So, and again, that's incentivized by the incumbent protection that you were talking about with the DCCC and DSCC, but also by the fact that it's impossible. How is somebody who makes $50,000 a year supposed to get elected to the House, and then how someone making $50,000 a year isn't going to keep their job if they're elected to the House,
right?
Or their passive income like a millionaire would. So they now have to live solely on the income provided by the House. They have to live in D.C., which is one of the highest market rate. Yeah, I mean, it all needs to be changed.
The first question to that point, John, the first question that Rahm Emanuel asked me after he asked about smoking crack was, "Are you a self-funder?" First question. You want to know how rich I was, how much money I could put into my own campaign, right? Because that's what matters. And I told him, no, I'm going to have to go raise the money, but and whatever I do have, I'll put a couple bucks in, but I'm not jeopardizing my kids' future and my retirement to do this, right? So you're spot on, man. It's crazy how much I had to quit my job. I mean, it's a statewide race, like a Senate race. I couldn't work and run statewide at the same time, right? Luckily, my wife is a small business person who owns their own small business, has done relatively well. So I could do that. But you're right, most people can't. And so you end up with people that have no clue what regular people are going through every day running for office. And I'm not begrudging rich people either. Nobody needs to have $400 billion. The top annual tax rate in this country, the top marginal tax rate since 1913, if you take out the first couple of years, what was like 5%, is somewhere in the 60% range, right? Historically. And the only two times it's been below 50% are before the Great Depression and before the Great Recession. I'm talking about just the top marginal rate. So we need to get it back up.
I think we're all in universal agreement here. Mr. Pitchbot, Mr. Mix, do we have anything that you gentlemen would like to add?
I'd like to, since there's a lot of controversy on our blogs about the 50 Howard Dean and the 50 state effort, I'd like to get Gary's take on that as a candidate who did that while he was during his campaign.
Can we just reflect on how different things are that the Dean scream derailed Howard Dean's candidacy, and now we've got a president dropping the hard R on national TV every night.
Yeah, it's insane. So you're right. It's crazy. First, a quick, really funny Howard Dean story. His brother happened to have a house here near where I live, and Jimmy Dean and James Dean, whatever you want to call him. And I know him. And at one point, I wanted to get the governor's endorsement. It was a Democrat at the time, Friedenthal, but he was hesitating to give me an endorsement for whatever his reasons were. So I thought I would call Howard Dean directly and see if I could get him to get somebody, I don't know, get Obama to talk to him or whatever it was. So I get this phone number from his brother, and I'm on the road in Rawlins, Wyoming, and I pull on the side of the highway and I dial the number, and this voice answers, this deep voice, and it's like, Howard Dean's phone. May I help you? And I'm like, my name's Gary Trauner. I'm running for U.S. Congress in Wyoming, and I've talked to Governor Dean before, and I really want to talk to him about blah blah blah. And all of a sudden it's like, Gary, is that you? And it was Howard Dean faking being his own administrative assistant, answering his phone. And it was like, I fell in love with the guy right there. But to answer the question, he put money into Wyoming, and we had a ground game. We had a field game that we've never had before in Wyoming. We had polling, and we had, the ability to hire and raise volunteers with money that we had never been able to do in Wyoming. And, you need to sustain that. It was great for one race or two races that we were able to put together, a field organization that we had never had before. But you need to be able to sustain that. And in 06 and 08 were sort of, 06 was a really good time for Democrats. 08 was a little bit tougher presidential year in Wyoming for me. But you need to sustain that. And I get, Wyoming used to be Democratic. West Virginia used to be Democratic. I know it's been a long time, right? But things do change, but they're not going to change if you don't have sustained effort. And that's where, Mr. Mix, I think the sustained 50-state strategy can pay off, but it's the long game. And we don't play the long game very well. Republicans do, right? Their whole Heritage Foundation sort of ecosystem of media, et cetera, they've been playing that, SCOTUS, they've been playing that long game way better than we have.
Well, I think one of the things that happened in West Virginia, too, is that we ran milquetoast, moderate, pro-corporate Democrats for so long that the Democrat brand doesn't really stand for anything
right
other than screwing over people in West Virginia. The Republicans will at least tell you, hey, you're great, you're the good people, you're pro-God, you're pro-guns, whatnot, and then still continue to screw them, but at least they're saying nice things to them, but whereas the Democrats, every time, well, look at Manchin, every time there was something that could have appreciably improved the lives of his citizens, he balked.
Yeah.
And he'd go on TV and say, I love West Virginia, but and I do believe he loves West Virginia. It's just,
Yeah. I think what we forget is we're so policy oriented in general. We think if we put out some 10-point healthcare plan that makes sense to us, that people are just going to be like, wow, that's great. I'm in. Right. But when you go knock on people's doors, you realize, I call it the circle of trust. I can knock on someone's door and they can agree with me on everything. But if I haven't found a way inside their circle of trust in the first 10 seconds, they won't hear a word that I say, right? Because they think I've got a D next to my name. And so we need to find a way to have that simple message, like you just said, like pro God, you love God, you love guns, whatever the Republicans say before they screw you. We need to find a way to have that simple connection first before we can start talking about all these great policy ideas that we have. Because otherwise, no one will hear you. And we're not that great at it.
Yeah, I've just given up on policy being important in elections, unfortunately. I mean, because if that was the case, it would have been President Hillary Clinton. It
Right.
would have been President Kamala Harris. I mean, it's all just a vibe. It's a vibe tempered by sexism and racism. That's all it is.
Yeah. No, it is. But again, you can do it. I mean, if I knocked on someone's door and I walk up and I saw that they had a big wheel in the driveway, I knew they had kids. Right. So you just start the conversation by asking them about their kids and how they're doing in school or whatever it is. Right. And then at least there's a connection there where you can start talking about other stuff. But if I just knock on someone's door and, my name's Gary Trauner, I'm running for U.S. House, and they're like, what party are you? And I said, I'm a Democrat. And they're like, see you later. Bye. You're out. Right? You got no shot. No matter, even if they'll agree with you. That's the challenge, at least.
Yeah, there's some places in West Virginia, I don't even know if it's safe to go to say you're a Democrat.
Yeah.
There are definitely houses I would not approach around here.
I had some of those, but, most people actually were pretty nice. I definitely had people who, when they heard it was a D, they just slammed the door in my face, but they didn't threaten me at least, But yeah, there are places in Wyoming I probably steered away from. There's a town in Wyoming called Eden, Wyoming, which is just, it's not even a town. It's just a speed trap. And there's this cement block bar called the Eden Bar, which everyone told me I had to go into. And I knew that if I went in there, I probably wouldn't come out alive. So I didn't have the guts to ever go in there in 3 races. And it still to this day pisses me off that I didn't do it. But there are some places.
You can put it on your bucket list. You can go now without the pressure.
I still might not survive.
Grab the wife, tell her we're going out for a big dinner. Head on down to the Eden Bar.
Exactly. There are
Get
probably
yourself
nice
some
folks
chicken
in there too.
tenders.
Who the heck knows? But I couldn't do it.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Gary. Do you gentlemen want to close this out, or I can't even remember how we do this normally?
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it, by the way.
Yeah, you take care. And are you running again?
I just got over a cancer diagnosis. I just want to be happy in my life for the remainder at this point. I'm still involved in stuff, but I'm probably not I'm getting too old to do that. I've got 2 boys. I'm hoping that at least one of them, maybe someday, although they're born and raised in Wyoming and they're both back east right now. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
I know. It's a tough one.
I don't think they're coming back.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Although they love.
I don't think I'd be here anymore if it weren't for my parents still being alive.
Yeah, I get it.
So,
yeah, it's a tough
did
one.
these guys fall asleep on us, Mr. Mix?
We're right here. We're right here.
You finish. You always finish it, John. You do a great job.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess this is the end. Beautiful friend, the end.
It's the end, my friend.
All your plans and dreams, my friend. All right. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a
Have a
lot.
great one.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
We'll be in
You
touch.
too.